Well, hello there, my name's Greg. Welcome to my stream today. We're going to be looking at some changes to the first responder kit again, this time looking at the database restore proc. So I found a bit of an issue recently when I was restoring my test database. The issue was definitely me, but let me switch over to some code and I'll show you what we're looking at. We can work out how we're going to fix this thing. So switching over to here. This is my test server. As you can see, I've got this database called samples. I normally use this SP database restore to get my samples to work. So it restores the database onto a fast drive for me. And I noticed the other day that it didn't work. I got a really weird error about file names not existing. So normally when I run it, this is what happens. Runs through its little thing, some messages. A little thing restores the database. Nice and simple. The other day, though, I found that I had accidentally set the parameter restore database name equal to nothing. Now, obviously, that's a stupid thing to do. But when I did it, you get this weird error saying select into statements, verify each one has a column name. It's all just a little bit. What's that got to do with the error that I've generated there? So that's what we're trying to fix today, is to make it so that that error message is just a little bit more useful, or ideally that error message doesn't happen at all. So that's what we're trying to fix. So the first thing we're going to do is jump into Brent's GitHub repository, and we're going to create an issue. Create as a bug report. So we're going to create an issue here, which we're going to call SP database restore fails, and let's grab the name of that parameter. Restore database name is empty string. Current behavior is when supplying empty string as the restore database name, SP database restore errors out with a cryptic message, that message in. We can make that pretty as well, I think. Something like that. So the current behavior of the bug, so to get it to happen, we need to run something like this. Expected behavior. Ideally, the database will treat the empty string as if no string was specified. Alternatively, error out with a useful message. Leave that aside for the moment. I will submit pull requests shortly. Fix this bug. Alright, so now we have an issue. It's issue 2536. So the next step is to create ourselves a branch. So I use Visual Studio to manage Git because that's just what I do. So we are going to create a new branch off dev. We're going to call it issue 536. Over to it. Perfect. Alright, so we now have the code in the right branch. I've already got SP database restore open here, so now we need to work out what's going on. Now we could try and work out what this error message actually is, but we know it's caused because of this empty string here, so how about we just deal with that instead. So if we have a look at where this thing here is used, see if we can find a nice easy place to work it out. Ooh, this one here looks lucky actually. So it looks like if the restore database name is null, which is what it would be if you didn't pass in a parameter, then set the restore database name equal to the database name, the original database name. Now that seems pretty likely, so let's remember that one. Let's just see where else it gets used. That's not going to help us much. That's not going to help me either. Oh, database. So once we get to here with the order database restore database name, it's already assuming we're using database name. So at this point here, it's too late. So let's go back to that previous one that we found. Let's find it again. Oop. Restore database name. This one here. So what if we change this so that it said if the restore database name is null or it's an empty string, then we should set the restore database name equal to database. That should be pretty simple to do, right? If restore database name, or we could check the length, restore database name 0, and set it there. That should work, right? Let's give it a try. Save that, run that code into master, and let's see what happens. So now we're passing in an empty string still. Bit of a think, so that's a good sign, and looks like that's worked. It's nice and simple. Let's have a look over on the side here. So I've got samples database has come through. Just delete it out just to make sure it's not an artifact hanging around, but I'm pretty sure that's fine. So run that again. I think there we go. And the database comes up as samples. There it is. Alright, so that works. So now let's see what happens if we put in a name. Make sure that we haven't broken that. Store it as another name. Having a think, having a think, having a think. Excellent, that looks good. Side here. Yep, samples 1, perfect. And so the other test would be if we don't specify it at all, that still restores as samples. So let's just delete these back out again. Should you script it in the drop statement would have been easier. And that's thinking through, thinking through, thinking through. There's my samples database. Excellent. So it looks like that's working. One other weird one which I did think of just then was what if somebody passes through space? Instead of passing through an empty string, they pass through a space. What happens there? And I think the answer is going to be that the script will actually work just fine. But let's give it a try. Because I think what will happen is that SQL will actually let you have a database called space. Let's have a think and let's see what happens. Not my string. Do that right? See what happened before. Let me take out this change again. It's ridiculous that SQL lets you have a database called space. I don't ever do that. But there it is. It's coming up there. So it's restoring. Happily restores it as space. So we have broken that. Two parts of me wonder whether we just tell Brent that that's now broken. Let him decide whether that's okay or not. But the other part of me says, well, let's see if we can work out why it's broken. Why is that length there broken all of a sudden? It's probably not doing a trim, because if it was, then we wouldn't have got the space when we restored a space. But the length should be 0. Database name is null. If the length of it equals 0, then set that there. Again. Here we're saying restore database name is now a space. But I think we'll see that the samples database is the one getting loaded. Now, what else could we do in here? We could just have a quick look around and see if we can work out what's going on, because that doesn't make any sense to me. So we could print at restore database name. We could print the length of restore database name. It's going to put in some debug code there as we're working through it. We'll take that out before we check it in. So if we run that now, see the length comes back as 0, even though there's clearly a character in there. But we have 2 spaces. Still 0. Somehow SQL knows that that should be an empty string when we're comparing strings. Null does not count trailing spaces. Sure what you mean by that one, James. Oh, sorry, length does not count trailing spaces. Ah, interesting. I did not know that. Length does not count trailing spaces. That will break everything for me. Let's have a quick look at that. So SQL length trailing spaces. Do the screen here so you can all see it. Length function does not include trailing spaces in SQL Server. Clearly documented by Microsoft. There you go. Length does not include trailing spaces. So we are going to break that if we check this code in. I'm still okay with that. I can't imagine Brent's going to have an issue with me saying that you can't have a database called space. But he might, and we'll deal with that when he does. So let's stick with our debug statements. Let's stick with what we've got here. Or actually, what we could do, instead of checking length, we could just say equals empty string, right? That would be the even easier way to do this. That would then take out our problem. If I restore that, and I mean, seriously, who calls a database space? What name is that? Alright, so that has restored, and it's come through as... It's still not there. Alright, James, why didn't that one work? So we print the restore database name. Let's put some characters around it as well, just so we can see it. So let's go star plus restore database name plus another star at the end, just so we can see that string that's actually in it. I want to check we're actually hitting this bit of code as well, right? So print setting restore database name. That in. Knows it's a space there. Yet it still thinks that the restore database name equals. I'm stumped on that one. I'm still going to go with the change though, simply because I don't think it's going to matter to anybody in the real world. So these scripts are designed for people in the real world, and if somebody has a problem with that, they can submit their own pull request to try and fix it, or they can kind of flag some suggestions on why it is actually a problem. So one last check, that is definitely going to restore as samples. Yep, and we're going to take out our debug code. Otherwise, make it look a little silly. Save that. Excellent. Did the wrong bit. Alright, So now we've got our code done. We're going to add a little note when we check it in, just to mention that space issue. Perfect, that's still working. So in here we've got our changes, what that other file is. So let's just stage this one. Message in here, SP database restore. Could use the database name and restore database name is empty string. So we'll commit that, push that up. Excellent. So that's now being pushed up to, or is currently pushing up to my copy of the First Responders Kit. We'll open up here. Yeah. Check on this, just make sure that I have got it right. Yep, so we're taking out the null and we're putting in, or it's an empty string. String. Note, if try to restore database with name space, then this will restore the database with at base name instead. Note in there as well, fixes, what was the number, 2536. Excellent, so we'll create that pull request and make that Brent's problem to decide what he's going to do with it. So that's about it for today. That's our change to the First Responders Kit for today. Brent will review that in due course, I hope, and we'll provide some feedback. I've got a few more on this database restore. There's a few extra bugs which I found along the way. So we might do another one of these next week or possibly the week after. But thanks for joining us, James, and we'll chat again soon. See ya.